The night my father told me to get out of his house, my brother was still laughing. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable one, a real laugh, the kind that fills a room and makes other people want to join in even when they don't know why. He was 27. I was 24, and we were sitting at a dinner table surrounded by 12 members of our extended family, all of them there to celebrate my father's 50th birthday. My brother had just finished a story about how I'd turned down a management position at my father's commercial real estate company to apply to an architecture program in Oregon. He told it like a punchline. He delivered it in that easy, charming way he always had. The way that made my father's eyes light up whenever the two of them were in the same room. "She thinks drawing floor plans is going to pay the bills," my brother said, still grinning at the table around him. "Meanwhile, Dad's been carrying her for 6 years. You have to admire the consistency, at least." The table went a little quiet. Not silent, just that particular quiet where people are deciding whether to laugh or pretend they didn't hear. My father set down his fork, looked at me. Not angry, not even disappointed, just final, the way a person looks when they've already made a decision and feel no particular need to justify it. "He's right," my father said. "I've been patient, Stella. But patient doesn't mean forever. This family runs on people who show up and produce results. You've had 6 years to figure out which kind person you are, and this is suture." He picked up his fork again. "If Oregon is what you want, then go. But I'm not funding a fantasy, and I'm not holding a seat for you at this company. You walk out that door and choose that path, you're choosing it alone." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. My aunt, my father's younger sister, the only person at that table who looked like she was actively holding something back, pressed her lips together and looked down at her plate. My mother reached for her wine glass. My brother took a roll from the bread basket. I folded my napkin, pushed my chair back, and walked out of that dining room while the conversation had already started moving on to something else behind me. I made it to my car in the driveway before I stopped. I sat behind the wheel with both hands in my lap for a long time, not starting the engine. It was October in Nashville, and the maples along that street had gone red and gold in the specific way that makes everything look like a painting you don't deserve to be standing inside of. I was wearing a dress I'd bought for the occasion. I had $600 in my checking account. I had a letter of acceptance to the University of Oregon's professional architecture program sitting in a folder on my passenger seat, which I'd been planning to show my father after dessert. I started the engine. I drove 3.5 hours south to Memphis. My aunt picked up on the first ring when I was still 40 miles out. "I know," she said before I'd gotten a single word out. "I know, honey. The porch light's on. Come straight here." She had moved to Memphis 8 years earlier when she married, and her house sat at the end of a quiet street with a magnolia tree in the front yard that was older than either of us. She opened the door before I finished parking, wrapped both arms around me in the driveway in the dark, and didn't ask a single question until I'd been sitting on her couch for 20 minutes with a cup of tea I wasn't drinking. "You should know something," she said, eventually carefully. "Your father called me an hour ago." I looked at her. He wanted to know which side I was on. She turned her mug slowly in her hands. "I told him I wasn't playing that game. But Stella, you need to understand something about why I can't have you here longer than a few days. My husband's engineering firm gets close to 40% of its commercial referrals through your father's network. I can't have you staying here. It's not because I don't love you, and I need you to know that clearly. It's because your father will make one phone call and 6 people who depend on my husband for their livelihoods will lose their jobs. That's the reality I'm living in. It didn't make me angry, it just made me tired in a way that went all the way down to the floor. She slid a folded envelope across the coffee table. $600. It's what I can give without it showing up anywhere he monitors. And I have a contact in Portland. A woman I went to college with who runs a sustainable design consultancy. She said she'd take a call from you. I picked up the envelope. I didn't argue. When you're ready to come back, she said, you come back standing up. You hear me? Don't let him see you crawling back. 3 days later, I was on a Greyhound heading northwest, watching the country change outside the rain-streaked window, the flat green of Tennessee giving way to the red rock desert of Utah, the high emptiness of Nevada, and then finally the wet gray forests of the Pacific Northwest. I had a backpack, 2 suitcases, my enrollment papers from Oregon, and a phone number written on the back of a gas station receipt. The first 2 years in Portland were the kind of years you don't describe in detail because there's nothing glamorous in them, and you get tired of hearing yourself sound like a hard luck story. I waitressed at a breakfast place on SE Division for 14 months. I took on data entry work in the evenings. I went to architecture school on Thursday nights and Saturday mornings and did the rest of the coursework online, balanced on a second-hand desk in a studio apartment where the radiator made a sound like someone kicking a tin bucket and the upstairs neighbor practiced drums until midnight twice a week. My aunt sent money when she could, $80 here, $120 there, always in a plain envelope with one line of her handwriting. Don't you dare stop. I kept every one of those envelopes in a shoebox under the desk. The contact she'd given me, a woman who ran a small design consultancy out of a converted Victorian in the Selwood neighborhood, hired me as a drafting assistant after 6 months. I worked there during the days and went to class at night. I got my architecture license the summer I turned 27. I cried in my car in the parking lot of the testing center and called my aunt, who answered on the second ring and said, I knew. I always knew it would happen like this. I started Aldren Studio in 2021. Just me, a freelance structural engineer I'd met through my old boss, and a rental agreement on a 2-room office space above a bicycle shop on Alberta Street. The name came from a street I used to walk down in Nashville when I was trying to clear my head. I didn't think about that until after I'd filed the paperwork. The first full year, we cleared $180,000 in revenue. Modest but real. Money that I had made, that no one could take back or call a charity. The second year, we landed a mixed-use residential project in the Pearl District and hired 3 people. The third year, I was in the pages of Architect magazine's Pacific Northwest issue. My father doesn't read that magazine. My brother doesn't either. But 43,000 people do, and some of them have money to spend on the kind of careful, sustainable design work we were becoming known for. By early 2024, Aldren Studio had completed 11 projects in Portland, 2 in Seattle, 1 in Boise, and 1 in Sacramento. We had 9 employees and a reputation for sustainable design that could navigate a city planning commission without friction. That reputation was the reason the city of Nashville reached out to us in February of that year. They were forming an urban sustainability review panel, a group of independent firms tasked with evaluating commercial development projects for compliance with new environmental building standards the state legislature had passed the year before. Aldren Studio had done similar panel work in Portland and Sacramento. The city coordinator described us as exactly the profile we're looking for. I said yes without thinking too hard about what it meant to go back. Nashville was a city I knew. I told myself that was the only thing it meant. The review work brought me to Nashville 3 or 4 days a month, through spring and into summer. I stayed at a hotel in Germantown, walked along the Cumberland in the mornings, and kept my head in the work. In June, a project called Harmon Tower appeared in the review queue, a 42-story luxury residential tower proposed for the Gulch neighborhood. The development company on the submission was listed as Summit Ridge Holdings, LLC. I read the filing, flagged 2 items for additional clarification, and moved on. It wasn't until the following week, during a routine meeting with the city's planning director, that someone mentioned the principles behind Summit Ridge Holdings. My father's name. My brother's name. I drove back to my hotel and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time staring at the wall. I called my aunt that night. She answered before the second ring. Harmon Tower, I said. Summit Ridge Holdings, you know about this project? A pause. Then, your father's been working on it for 3 years. It's the largest thing they've ever taken on. The financing deal they've been building toward closes in the fall. I'm on the review panel for it. A longer pause, then very quietly, oh my goodness. I recused myself from the Harmon Tower review the next morning. I submitted the paperwork to the city ethics office, documented the familial connection in full, and requested that an independent reviewer be assigned. The city responded within 48 hours and brought in a firm from Denver that had no connection to anyone in Nashville. The process was clean. I had no further involvement in that project. What happened next was not something I arranged. In late August, I received an email from the events coordinator at the Claremont Hotel, a restored historic property in East Nashville, with a reputation I'd admired from a distance for years. They had been referred to Aldren Studio by an event designer we'd collaborated with on a Sacramento project. They were renovating their grand ballroom ahead of the fall wedding season and needed an architect to oversee the structural and design work. Could I review the project scope and schedule a call? I pulled up the project brief. The first major booking listed after the renovation completion date was a wedding reception. I skimmed the event details. The groom's family, the Prescott family of Nashville. That stopped me. It had been my name once, the name I'd left behind on a driveway in October 9 years ago. I read the line again just to be sure. The bride's family, the Harringtons. I set my phone face down on the desk and looked out the window at the street below for a long time. Then I called my aunt. She picked up on the second ring. Tell me something, I said. He's marrying the daughter of Douglas Harrington, she said, before I'd asked a single specific question. The financing deal your father's been building toward. Harrington is the main investor. The engagement was announced in April. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how. I looked at the project brief still open on my screen. The hotel hired my firm to renovate the ballroom. They had no idea I had any connection to the family. The line was quiet for a moment. Stella, my aunt said slowly, you designed the room where your brother is going to get married, and he has no idea it was you. There was a silence, and then we were both laughing at the same time, the kind of laughter that catches you off guard, that comes from somewhere deep and surprised, and a little bit unhinged. The kind you can't manufacture. You come back like yourself, she said, when we'd both quieted down. You hear me, don't change a single thing. I did not sabotage the ballroom. I want to be clear about that, because it's the part people always want to assume. I designed that space the way I design every space, with care, with precision, with the kind of attention to acoustics and proportion and light that I had spent 9 years learning to give. The renovation came out beautifully. The restored ceiling medallions I'd spent 4 weeks sourcing from a salvage operation in Knoxville caught the chandelier light exactly the way I'd calculated they would. I was proud of it, genuinely and without ambivalence. On the evening of the reception, my contract with the hotel included a final walkthrough, a standard clause part of any site completion agreement. I arrived during cocktail hour and met the venue coordinator at the side entrance. We walked the space together. The lighting was perfect. The acoustic baffles I'd specified were invisible and functional. Everything I'd drawn was exactly as I'd drawn it. The coordinator was pleased. I was pleased. I said goodnight and turned toward the exit. I was halfway across the main foyer when I heard my brother's voice. He was 20 feet away with a drink in his hand, telling a story to a group of men in dark suits. That same easy laugh, that same way of making everyone around him feel like they're in on something. He was older than I remembered, fuller in the face, more settled into himself, and wearing a tuxedo that fit him the way expensive things always fit people who've had them their whole lives. I stopped walking. I didn't mean to. My feet just went still. He turned the way people do when they feel eyes on them, and his gaze found me across the foyer. The laugh died in his throat. The hand holding the drink went completely still. The color in his face went with it. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there in the room I had designed and let him look at me. A man standing to his right, Douglas Harrington. I recognized him immediately from the project documents the city kept on file, looked between us, registered the sudden change in my brother's expression, and turned to follow his gaze. His eyes landed on me, then on the small enamel pin on the lapel of my blazer, Aldren Studio's mark, the one I'd had made in the second year when I finally felt like we'd earned a logo. He squinted slightly, then back up to my face. Aldren Studio, he said. Not a question. His voice was measured and careful in the way of men who've spent decades in rooms where words cost money. You're the principal architect. Yes, I said. He looked at my brother. I thought, your sister, you said she was working coffee shop jobs out in Oregon, that she'd lost her way. He looked back at me. You're the same person who's been in the Nashville Business Journal twice this year. My brother opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I turned to look at him. He looked exactly the way I'd spent years imagining he might, and also nothing like it. I thought he might reach for the charm, the easy pivot, the way he'd always been able to make a room tilt back toward him. Instead, he just stood there looking at me like I was a variable he had no model for. The ballroom looks beautiful, I said. I hope tonight is everything you planned for. I turned and walked toward the side exit. Stella. His voice behind me, lower than I remembered it. I didn't stop. I made it to the side corridor before I heard heels on the marble, quick and purposeful, and then a voice. Please, just a moment. I stopped and turned. She was in her late 20s, dark hair pinned up elegantly, wearing a gown that was simple in the way that only very expensive things manage to be. She was looking at me with the focused attention of someone trying very hard to stay composed while the ground beneath them is moving. This was Felicity Harrington, my brother's bride, on her wedding night, in a hallway off the ballroom I had designed for her. My father recognized your firm's name the moment he saw your pin, she said. He follows sustainable design work. It's adjacent to some of the development projects he funds. He's seen Aldren Studio in planning documents. He knows who you are. She paused, steadied herself. You were on the city's review panel for the Harmon Tower project. I recused myself, I said, as soon as I confirmed the family connection. I documented everything with the city ethics office and requested an independent reviewer. She absorbed that. Something crossed her face, not quite relief, not quite its opposite. Why didn't you stay on it? She said quietly. You could have made things very difficult for them. Because that's not the kind of work I do. She was quiet for a moment, looking at me in a way that felt like she was recalibrating something. The independent reviewer filed their report 2 weeks ago, she said then. My father has a copy. He was going to wait until after the wedding to address it. She looked at the floor, then back at me. The report found falsified structural compliance documents, 3 separate load-bearing certifications that were backdated. The city is opening a formal investigation. I already knew. The report summary had gone to all original panel members as a matter of administrative record. I was no longer an active reviewer, but my name was still on the distribution list. I know, I said. She nodded, very slowly. My father isn't going to put $8 million into a project that's headed toward a fraud investigation. The formal announcement of his stake was scheduled for a breakfast meeting next Monday. She paused. It won't be happening. I waited. There was more. I could see it in the way she was holding herself. He told me you'd burned every bridge the family ever built for you, she said finally, her voice going quieter. That you'd made a series of bad choices and disappeared, and it had been painful for everyone who loved you. He said it like he was the one who'd been carrying the grief of it. She looked at the enamel pin on my lapel for a moment. He told Felicity. He told me that story on our 3rd date. I felt sorry for him. I held her gaze and let her sit with that. She straightened, took a breath. I'm going back in there, she said. I don't know what happens after tonight, but I needed you to know that I understand now. She turned and walked back toward the ballroom, heels precise, spine straight, chin level. I watched her go until she disappeared through the doorway, and the sound of the string quartet swelled briefly, and then was muffled again by the closing door. I walked out to the parking lot and called my aunt from the driver's seat. She picked up on the first ring. Well? It went okay, I said. A long exhale. Was it good? I thought about the ceiling medallions and the way the light fell on them. I thought about my brother's face. I thought about Felicity Harrington, walking back into that ballroom, with her spine perfectly straight. It was enough, I said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh, almost something else. Breakfast Sunday, before you fly back. That place on Broad with the good biscuits. I'll be there, I said. Good night, my girl. The following Monday morning, Douglas Harrington's office issued a 1-paragraph statement withdrawing from the Summit Ridge Holdings joint venture, citing material concerns regarding project compliance and corporate transparency. By noon, the city of Nashville had issued a formal construction hold on Harmon Tower, pending investigation into the compliance documents. The crews got phone calls. The tower sat at 38 stories with no certifiable path to continue. By midweek, 2 of Summit Ridge's 3 primary lenders had triggered default clauses. The combined exposure was somewhere north of $60 million, according to the Nashville Business Journal, which ran the story on Thursday morning. My mother filed for legal separation that same Thursday. She moved into a rental in Green Hills with a friend she'd known since before she married my father. She didn't call me. I hadn't expected her to, and I found when I thought about it that I wasn't angry about it. Just tired in the old familiar way, the way I'd been tired at 24 on a driveway in October. My brother's honeymoon in Italy was cut short. He and Felicity flew home after 4 days. What happened between them after that, I don't know. I didn't ask anyone, and no one told me. My father called my aunt 3 times in the week after the Business Journal story. She answered once, said I can't help you with this, and let the rest go to voicemail. He left 7 messages over 2 days. She never answered again. 9 months later, my brother called me. I was in my Portland office going over drawings for a mixed-income housing project on the east side, and my phone lit up with a Nashville area code I still had saved under his name from 9 years back. I watched it ring 4 times. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. A few weeks after that, I received a letter from my father. Handwritten, 4 pages on his personal stationery. The kind of letter you can tell took a long time and several drafts to write. You can see it in the places where the ink pressure changed, where sentences trail off and restart. He wrote about regret. He wrote about pride pointed in the wrong directions. He wrote my name 11 times. I counted without meaning to. I read it through once. I folded it carefully along its original creases and put it in the shoebox with my aunt's envelopes. I haven't written back. Not because I'm still punishing anyone. There's no punishment left in me. That ran out somewhere around year 4 in Portland, when I realized that carrying rage takes energy I'd rather spend on other things. It's simpler than that. I've spent 9 years building something that belongs entirely to me, and I'm very deliberate about what I let inside of it now. My aunt came to visit in March. We walked along the Willamette waterfront in the rain the way you do in Portland, not fighting it, almost fond of it, and stopped at a coffee shop where the windows were completely fogged and the barista knew my order before I reached the counter. She wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at me the way she always has. Like she can see a few feet further into the situation than anyone else in the room. "You doing okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "I really am." She nodded, like she'd already known, but wanted to hear me say it. The shoebox is still under my desk at home, behind a stack of drawing tubes. The $600 my aunt gave me that night in Memphis is still in there, in the original rubber-banded roll, next to every envelope she ever sent. I've thought about doing something symbolic with it, framing it, donating it, some kind of gesture that would make the story feel complete. But every time I think about it, I decide to just leave it where it is. It's the thing I walked out, carrying the night the door closed behind me, and the maples were red, and the only concrete plan I had was a phone number on the back of a gas station receipt. Turns out it was enough to build everything else on.